Well, here we are again, without public masses, and during a pandemic that seems like a marathon with no finishing line. It's been 18 months of masks and lockdowns, businesses collapsing, offices closed, mental illness rising, sickness and death surrounding us in ways we never thought possible. And all because a virus we cannot see. How fragile everything now seems. Yet into this chaos and misery and uncertainty, Saint Therese offers 7 important words. How can my confidence have any limits? How can my confidence have any limits? When she spoke those words, Saint Therese was speaking about Easter Sunday and the resurrection. And it's very simple. Christianity either stands or falls on the resurrection. Christianity either stands or it falls on the resurrection. And it was St. Paul long ago in writing to the Corinthians who said that if Christ is not raised from the dead, then we are a most pathetic mob. If Christ is not raised from the dead, then we are a most pathetic mob. But if Christ is raised from the dead as we believe, then the resurrection holds the key that opens every door, the door of life and the door of death. So like life in a pandemic, all the Easter stories in Scripture are full of gaps and silences, because the people who encountered the risen Christ didn't expect it, and they didn't know what to make of it. Our lives have been filled these last 18 months with all kinds of gaps and silences, not knowing what to expect, not knowing what will come next, not knowing what the future might hold. And so we can identify with those followers of Jesus. Who can blame them? Because nothing happened as they'd expected. They'd seen Jesus die an agonizing death on the cross. And when he died, it seemed all over. They saw his tortured body placed in a tomb. They saw the big stone rolled in front of the entrance of the tomb and sealed. So not surprisingly, they thought there was nothing more. The whole show had collapsed, leaving only disaster, devastation, and death. And that's been the experience of the world these past 18 months. Disaster, devastation, and death. And so many people have shared their experience. Is it all over? Has everything collapsed? Is there no hope for the future? Will this never end? Where is God? But go back to those followers of Jesus. 3 days later, they met him, or he met them. And again, they didn't know what to make of it. At first, they thought he was a ghost, but he had a body, but a body of a different kind. He'd entered into some other dimension that they couldn't understand or explain. He could walk through a locked door, and yet they could touch him. They saw him eat a piece of fish. He was a body. There was no ghost. And eventually they came to realize and to recognize and to see and to say, he is risen from the dead. How? By the power of God's love. The only power that is stronger than death and evil. The people came to see that the resurrection of Jesus wasn't just about him. Yes, it happened to him, but it was also an experience of a new dimension of life offered to every human person. In fact, it was offered to the whole of creation, which is again what St. Paul talks about, creation groaning in one great act of giving birth, a birth into something new, a birth into Easter and new life. And that's the sense that we have now in our world, that somehow creation is groaning into a new great act of giving birth to something new, something we don't expect, something we don't know. But all of our Christian story speaks precisely to this experience the world has had in the last 18 months. Christianity is no conventional religion. Christianity is not about putting a band-aid on a sore. It's first and foremost about an experience of new life. The experience of light that's born from darkness. An experience of life that is bigger than death. And so together with Saint Therese, we put our faith in that truth. We believe that Christ is raised from the dead. And with Saint Therese, we announce it to the world, and we live it for the world. One thing is very clear now as it was 2,000 years ago. What was is no longer. And if we're trying to reclaim what was, then we'll be disappointed. What was is no longer. But what is to come is new. New life, which calls for a completely different and radical way of living and responding. For the early disciples, what was no longer. Jesus wasn't who they knew. But what was to come was this extraordinary new life that is stronger than darkness, stronger than death, stronger than evil, and stronger than suffering. Yes, it's uncertain, but that's the faith and the trust that is called from each one of us if we are Christian and if we believe that Christ is risen. So with Saint Therese, our confidence in the resurrection can have no limits. Nothing must stand in the way of our belief in the resurrection and its call to us to something radically new.